The first time I hear the A word is in the past tense when the gentleman who is doing the fingerprints and the mug shots, about 10 minutes after the sheriff who arrested me left me, he says, well, you were arrested. And I said, well, what for? And he said, being under the influence of a controlled substance. Now, those of you who are familiar with my history, with the things I've done in media, every place from Oprah to Larry King, those of you who are familiar with the lectures I've done from Berkeley to American University, understand that I have devoted a certain amount of my time to healthy eating, the utter absence of drugs from your life, and I'm talking about aspirin. Ladies and gentlemen, you are talking to someone who has not done one aspirin in his adult life, much less all of the stereotypical things that the average bigoted sheriff's deputy from Simi Valley is sure that all gang members do, or all black people who are, of course, all gang members. The thing that has been the cornerstone of so much of the lecture, so much of the presentation on national television, is the idea of health, the idea of a non-drug environment. That's been a part of my life's work. So after all of that history, all of that media, all of that lecturing, here I am, Friday morning, in some place called Carson, in a metal cage in the sheriff's department, being told that I have just been arrested for being under the influence of a controlled substance. Well, my first question to Mr. Paradis was, what controlled substance? And his answer was, I don't know. And it's very curious, even as I sit here, I don't know. They mugshot me, they fingerprint me, they do all of this, and they put me in another cell. The cell consists of just concrete, one toilet, and one face bowl. There's one gentleman who is laying on the floor, a gentleman, I think his name was Jeffrey Cook. Mr. Cook's crime was that he's homeless, and he and his wife had just been beaten up, and so somehow, as they went to report the crime in question, the sheriff arrested them. They were from Venice. Mr. Cook and his wife were from Venice. Mr. Cook is significant because he is the only white prisoner that I will see all of the time that I'm in jail. Sometime the guy who had done the fingerprinting, Mr. Paradis, comes back, and I asked Mr. Paradis I again demanded, as I had earlier, that I be permitted to give them urine samples. And he said, well, no, they won't let him do that. I made the point very clearly to Mr. Paradis that he essentially took my mugshot picture and all of the other conversations that he and I had approximately, I guess, an hour after I was originally arrested. And I said to the sheriff who had done all these mugshots and so forth, you and I spent quite a little time together. If you were subpoenaed and called to court to testify, and you were asked, did you see Mr. Lawson approximately an hour and 15 minutes after he was arrested? You'd have to answer yes. And I went through this. I went through this man step by step, specifically, if he was subpoenaed. And I said to him, if you were called to testify and you were asked, did Mr. Lawson, at the time you see him, exhibit anything that would lead you to believe that he was under the influence of anything? And I walked him through it. Did Mr. Lawson, if you were asked on the witness stand, did Mr. Lawson appear to have slurred speech? You'd have to answer no. Did Mr. Lawson seem agitated? You'd have to answer no. Did Mr. Lawson seem disoriented? You'd have to answer no. Did he seem ill-balanced? You'd have to answer no. I then said to Mr. Paradis, watch this. And I proceeded to stand on my head free from any of the walls around me. And he's, of course, saying, oh, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt yourself. And so after I'd finished standing on my head for a few seconds, I then got back upright and said, if you were subpoenaed and brought to court and asked, did you see Mr. Lawson stand on his head, which would demonstrate extraordinary coordination, extraordinary hand-eye muscle coordination, something that Mr. Paradis couldn't do, something that the gentleman who arrested me could not do, something that clearly anyone who is under the influence of anything would not be able to do. Most of the people who are watching this, you couldn't do it. And he said, obviously, yes, he would. He just saw me do it. And he saw me do it in front of Mr. Cook. The 4 cops who arrested me are going to lie. They are all these phony macho guys who are in this tactical unit who are just rife with all of these Negro fantasies. You can just see that they come to a near erotic ecstasies when they sort of visualize a perfect night would be when they run across this hulking, pitch black gang member who has muscles bulging from every place and tattoos covering all those bulging muscles and a razor cut hair, and they could there's 15 of them, push him around and maybe beat him up, and he would use profanity, and then they could use profanity, and somehow they could just feel this incredible testosterone rise, celebrating their false masculinity. And that's what they thought they were stopping. But the thing is, once I took the hood off, it's obvious I was not going to be the gang member that they were looking for. And so they fabricated this whole thing. This whole thing was racial profiling. Racial profiling went bad. A racially motivated stop that they then fabricated. These 4 cops fabricated this whole thing. They'll all lie, but the thing is, I don't think Paradis will lie. I then demanded of Mr. Paradis, I need to talk to the watch commander, whoever is in charge here. He said, well, I'll go get him. And he went off, nothing happened. At some point, a jailer, if that's what you call them, a woman, a black sort of fat woman, whose name was Tom, I guess that's her last name. She asked me a question. She comes in to ask me a question. I asked her, could you tell me who is the watch commander? And she says, I don't know. I think it's some woman named Ogle something. I said, would you go tell this woman, whoever she is, that I would like to speak to her? A woman comes back, who is the watch commander, whose name is Ogleby. I again demanded of her that they take a urine sample. She said no, they wouldn't do it. She said because it was no longer at the scene of the crime. And I told her, well, look, it's the same urine. I have not gone to the bathroom. I had somebody who was watching me ever since then. It's the exact same urine. And it's interesting, she tried to, again, practice medicine, which she's not qualified to do, by saying, well, the controlled substances might have broken down in your body. And she just wouldn't do it. Okay, so I said, fine, I'll let that go. The other thing I said to her is, well, okay, minimum you can do is just give me the same field sobriety test that they did. The whole thing where they have you close your eyes and all of that. And she said, no, I'm not trained to do that. They're trained to do that. So she refused to give me the field sobriety test again in front of people. She refused to take the urine sample. So I've been holding this urine, which I wanted to give to somebody in the sheriff's department because Lord knows there's a compatibility there. Nobody would take it.